Barbies, Hunter Biden scandals, and presidential campaign blunders. We're glad to have our president, Victoria Cobb, back in the hot seat this week, and we're going to pick her brain on some of the latest news headlines. Welcome to Speak Up Virginia, equipping you to speak up on the life, family, and freedom issues that matter most to you. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with Victoria Cobb. Well, Victoria, it's great to have you back in person. We missed you. Did you miss us?
Yeah, yes, I did. I didn't necessarily miss the stress of work, but I did miss all the people. Yeah, it was good.
Well, it is so great to have you personally in the seat, and we're not just relying on Slammer Hammer, who's a little bit worse for the wear.
Yeah, he's had some journeys, so he's taped up, as you can see. We had to literally put him back together.
Yeah, I don't know if people can see. There's been some damage.
I tried to protect him in a book a lot of times when I would take him places.
Poor Slammer Hammer.
Yeah.
All right, well, I have to confess that we did get behind on Slammer Hammer picks, and so we're going to do a little catch-up today and just throw a bunch up there.
Okay.
So I see that Slammer Hammer decided to become a modern-day patriot and accompany your family on the Freedom Trail. Tell us about that real quick.
We did a lot of... My kids actually hadn't been to New England, which I found kind of tragic because I grew up going there a lot, and so they hadn't done any of that history. So we took Slammer Hammer and the kids, and actually what was really funny is we went up to the Massachusetts legislature, and we walk in, and I wanted to see the inside of the Capitol, which is on the Freedom Trail. I walk in, and they're having a rally on medical freedom and parental rights and all that. And they apparently, they're a year-round legislature, so it's really uncommon that they have these big rallies. It wasn't like, how we have 45 days and it's constant chaos. This is like a big deal, and I'm like, I'm not at work. I'm I'm on vacation.
Your poor family is probably like, we just can't get away from this.
I know. It was really funny. But our sister organization was doing a great job mobilizing people. So that was really random.
All right. Well, one picture we have of Slammer Hammer is in front of Faneuil Hall.
Yes.
And that's where they have like the Stamp Act protest, Sugar Act, and eventually the protesting against the Tea Act. I think it was, So did you want to highlight anything else that Slammer Hammer did?
No, but I just absolutely encourage everybody to do the Freedom Trail if you haven't done it. It's just great history, all of it. I mean, and Emma, of course, for school had to memorize the Paul Revere, the Longworth poem, and so of course we get to all the Paul Revere stuff, and so it was very fun.
All right, well, just to mention a few of the other Slammer Hammer picks that we're going to throw up for our YouTube viewers. So there's one on a boat near Boston.
Yes, I have to be on water, so water has to be included in all vacations.
On top of Beehive Hike in Acadia National Park.
Yes, this was a great part of just our family likes to be active, and so we did a bunch of hiking in Acadia, and that is, if you have never done that, it's well worth the effort.
I get the idea. You guys don't do a lot of laying around and just...
I mean, we like our beach, laying on the beach. I mean, I like it all, but I really enjoy an active vacation. There were times where our kids were like, okay, we just did the Freedom Trail all day, and then we're going to the, we went to the baseball game at night, which also is a lot of walking and whatever to get there. And so there were times that the kids were like, this is very active, but I prefer it that way.
That's fun. I've always wanted to go to that stadium.
Yeah, it's an amazing stadium. Yeah.
All right, and then finally, I guess there's one from the Concord in Lexington.
Yes,
history.
Of course, we had to go to the battlefield. You just kind of have to. And my husband's a history guy, so you're going to have to do all that. And so that was good. I should mention Slammer Hammer did not get into Fenway. It was just too hard to.
That would have been a fun one.
Anyway, sorry about that. So.
All right, well, I have to expose a dirty little secret beneath all this, and that is I have learned that your family actually hated Slammer Hammer.
Yes, they did. My kids did not enjoy bringing him along, did not like when I'd be like, hey, let's get a picture of Slammer Hammer. They were, they willingly put up with it, but for some reason they did not find it entertaining.
He's just a distraction, a reminder of work,
I think they just had fun hating on Slammer Hammer.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was a thing, like kids just...
He was rejected by the Cobb family.
He had an association with work, and so therefore,
yes.
Which I think is ridiculous.
All right. Well, we'll create a safe refuge for him here, a safe place for Slammer Hammer. But diving right in, since we haven't gotten to hear the benefit of your thoughts on all the news happening lately, I was really excited to have you come in today and just pick your brain on several different topics. And of course, the most important one is Barbie.
Okay. Yes. It's hot right now.
Barbie is everywhere. Whether you like it or not, Barbie's all over my Facebook page with people debating about whether you should go see Barbie or not.
Yep.
I walked in a shoe store the other day, and there are Barbie doll displays in there, and I'm just thinking, what is this doing in here? I'm trying to buy shoes.
Yep. Pink everywhere all of a sudden. Yep.
Yeah. Can't get away from it. But you and I were talking about this kind of irony that seems to be in our culture right now, where here's this film that is trying to celebrate the empowerment of women, feminism, but then at the same time in our culture, we can't even define what a woman is. So what's going on?
Yeah, I find it really interesting that they went crazy and made this movie and tried to make these big statements out of Barbie. Barbie, I mean, you got to go back to the roots of Barbie, and this, I guess they tried to make that point at the beginning of the movie where these, dolls were always baby dolls, right? So kids always played house with them. They were the mom, the baby doll was the baby, and Barbie was supposed to be the revolutionary, like, no, this is you imagining your life as, a perfect life when you're older or whatever, I guess was the concept. You don't have to just be a mom. There's all these articles written of sort of like what Barbie was supposed to do to the doll. And I guess at the beginning of the movie, they like smashed the traditional dolls, which it's kind of like creepy.
It was a little disturbing.
I don't really understand that whole Space Odyssey spoof thing and how it all.
Yeah, but I watched the trailer. It is, because the baby dolls look kind of like real babies, and they're breaking them on the ground. It's a little disturbing.
It's a little odd. So there's all that going on, and yet Barbie was the thing about Barbie is she's the ridiculously perfect image of a female, like an unrealistic. The dimensions, the whole thing is not possible. And so you've got this. So to me, that's almost what feminism is trying to go against, is like that a female has to be perfect and has to look perfect and, all that.
There's
but
so
yet
many
they're
ironies.
But they're throwing all this in there. And then there's the whole issue of motherhood, and they seem to diss on motherhood a little bit in this movie. There's I guess somewhere in there there's some kind of line that basically the Barbie goes up to the mother Barbie doll and kind of says, well, you're getting discontinued. Like what? I guess they come back and they make it right by the end, but it's just
the pregnant, maybe there was like a pregnant Barbie or something.
It's just bizarre. It's just a strange movie with a lot of, if you read about it, what people say about it, the takeaways are all over the place. But what I think is really interesting is we're in this moment right now where more women are choosing motherhood. They're choosing stay-at-home lifestyle where they're not actually out in the workforce and doing 100 other things, which is a real turnaround in our culture. We were sort of trending towards more and more women going to work. Even if they were having kids, they were in the workforce. And now 2023, it says something like 24% of women are staying home, which is up like 8% over just a year or two ago. So I think, we saw COVID and people were home with their kids by force. And I think they quickly realized, there's something to this. This is actually a really wonderful thing. And now this year in particular, the stats are saying people are leaving jobs and their number one reason is staying home with kids. So whatever Barbie movie is doing, I'm not sure it's picking up on what's actually happening in our culture.
Yeah, because I guess that little girl smashing baby dolls scene is supposed to be like that they're getting free from some constricting parameters. Right. But do you feel like, to your point, in a sense, that the woke culture and Hollywood, they're trying to have it both ways?
They don't have a clue what. Yes, they've had to sort of take down the idea of motherhood and being home with your kids and make that a negative thing for so long. And they've tried to take down the perfect woman, but then they throw this movie and they make all these mixed messages. I think they don't know what they truly want, because I think they've just missed the boat, and they've been trying so hard to produce I don't know, this independent woman that has it all but doesn't have to be it all. It's very confusing to me.
Yeah, I saw that also there is a character in this movie that is apparently a biological man playing a female Barbie. So again, the irony of trying to celebrate the empowerment of women.
When you have a male acting as a female. This doesn't work. FYI, these two things collide. Feminism and transgenderism do not work together, because essentially in order to have that construct, you are saying that really being a woman is all about actually all the stereotypes, because that male becomes a woman when he puts on makeup. What? It doesn't make sense.
To your earlier point, I think they actually did a study of the dimensions of Barbie.
Oh, it's messed up.
Yeah, if you had a real life
woman,
woman,
18-inch waist and like 36-inch bust and like 33-inch hips. Just imagine, could you even like walk with I don't know anyway.
Maybe don't use a stereotype to fight a stereotype.
Right. Right.
I will just mention it was interesting to read about this kind of emotional diatribe that America Ferrera, as I think her character was Gloria, but she gave this whole speech, kind of stump speech, glorifying feminism, and it kind of camped out on how women have to live up to all these double standards. I mean, if you read it, the emotion of it does kind of, I could see where it resonates. You know, as you and I being career women, we have encountered some of this stuff, but she's kind of capitalizing on that whole victimhood refrain and the double standard problems in our society.
Well, and remember, there's a whole section of the movie that's about Ken. When he goes into the real world, he finds out that there's all this patriarchy, like the men rule the real world, and like in the Barbie land, it's more like the women kind of can do what they want, and the men just live at the beach and whatever. But no, in the real world, so he likes that and tries to go back and impose that. I mean, what they're trying to say about culture is just such a strange, mixed up message that I don't know how people walk away with any clarity.
Yeah, I guess it just underscores what this movie really reveals is all the contradictions in our culture right now. And what would you say the answer to that is? As a woman who has a family, wonderful career, I think it's wonderful. You know, you have challenges fighting the culture war, but
well, I mean, I think it's amazing. You know, coming off sabbatical where I was with my family all the time. That the idea that we would ever in any way diminish that for women, that is such an amazing, powerful thing. That anybody that tried to shove that down and say somehow career was better or something. That's just not going to be what's in the heart of most women. When they're actually with their children, they tend to love motherhood. Yes, it's hard. And they, you know, we're not going to glamorize anything. But I think that culture needs to embrace both. And they can. They absolutely can. They can absolutely cherish motherhood, and they can honor stay-at-home moms that don't work, and their entire work is in their home. And they can honor women that also are trying to have a career. And we don't have to. It doesn't have to be this one image in order to get where they want to go, I guess.
It seems like we're trying to destroy the core of who a woman is, even biologically. And Chloe Cole, her interview with me, when she talked about being in high school and hearing the family development class and it just coming on her like this revelation.
That she won't be able to, I mean, I remember her telling me like she wouldn't be able to breastfeed and learning like the idea that she's transitioned and lost part of what it is to be a woman. And that is desperately sad. I mean that out of everything she said, for some reason when she said that, I was
the same.
It hurt. You know, you know, it just was one of those. Wow, there's some things you can't get back. And no matter how much, I know there's. I don't know if you've been following the headlines about like chest feeding and the ridiculousness of trying to teach men. I mean, it can't be replicated. It can't be imitated. It's never going to be.
For those of you that aren't up on that, they're now referring to chest feeding.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So that they can be all inclusive for men to supposedly do this, even though that's not biologically possible. I don't think that it is. Well, moving along, I will talk about a redeeming movie that my husband and I saw. And we actually did another Richmond tradition.
Okay.
We made it to the Goochland Drive-In Theater.
Oh, that's a lot of fun.
We thought it was awesome. I mean, it was a nice summer night. It just was fun. They were playing old music, and I like the retro commercials.
Yeah, it's a great family-friendly thing to do with your kids, depending on what movies they're showing and stuff. We love it.
So we saw Sound of Freedom. And, you know, I won't say I found that was entertaining because I really had a hard time. It was tough, the content. I mean, I think it's absolutely necessary to bring this to the public eye on sex trafficking. But listening to the actors play these roles where they're investigators and they have to assume the role of a pedophile, I found that personally tough to listen to. I mean, I'm just gripping Michael's hand because it was so hard.
I have a hard time with anything where children are harmed, even if it's to shed light on the fact that children are harmed. I have a hard time watching it.
They did a tasteful job of showing the reality without getting too graphic into all that, but still, it was tough to watch. It was suspenseful. It wasn't action. You know, toward the end, it was just action that was compelling. But I got to say, the most powerful impact on me was, I think, this statistic that they flashed up at the end of the screen. And I'm just going to read it because it's jaw-dropping. I didn't realize this. Human trafficking is $150 billion a year industry. the U.S. is one of the top destinations for human trafficking and is one of the top consumers for child sex. There are more humans trapped today in slavery than at any point in human history, including when slavery was legal. I mean, think about that.
Yeah. And I think what was most disturbing to me about this movie is that that Hollywood just would not embrace it. I mean, it was like clearly being quieted. People went to see it. I mean, it actually beat box office records on all
Indiana
sorts.
Jones.
I know. Can you believe it? I mean, I was kind of shocked because I just figured, gosh, that's kind of a legendary movie to go up against. I mean, I kind of felt bad that it was going to have to go up against it, but it fared really well. But I just felt like there was absolutely an effort by Hollywood to quiet this movie down, to not encourage people to go, to not be supportive. And we know Hollywood has a long track record, I hate to say it, of being actually involved in sex trafficking.
Yeah, I think you can document those connections. I will say I heard an interesting interview with the producer at Eduardo, I think it was, who also plays a role in the movie. But he was saying that originally the movie that they were contracted with to do this film got bought out by Disney. And then Disney comes along and says, well, this movie isn't for us. And, that I think that's just very revealing.
Think about the movies that Disney's okay with, but then when we actually want to shine light on some of the disturbing things, we're out. That's disappointing.
And so just kind of bringing it back to the whole Barbie thing, again, you have this movie that claims to be taking on exploitation of women or raising up women, and yet we're turning a blind eye. Hollywood is turning a blind eye to this huge $150 billion industry, right in their own backyard.
Yeah,
so
it's easier to talk about things if you aren't connected to them, right? Like they don't want anybody shining a light in what's going on in Hollywood, which is super sad. I'm glad the movie was successful, nevertheless, despite that.
All right, I know we need to move on here, but I just want to ask one question.
Yeah.
Why do you think that movie was so successful? 'Cause it's a hard topic. It didn't have all the Barbie promotion. It didn't have any of those advantages, and yet it beat out the latest Indiana Jones. So what do you think the deal is with that?
I think people know there's this underbelly, and they don't know much about it, but they know that it is tragically a major part of our country. I mean, to your point, and I think people are aware of that and trying to figure out what do we do? We want to do something about it. And of course it's, deeply linked to the pornography industry, which is a whole other thing that we work on at this organization, is just the things that feed into sex trafficking. And
absolutely it does.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to move from movies to politics.
Okay.
So much better.
All right.
All right. Well, of course, the biggest thing that's been happening while you've been gone, well, of course, we've had all these indictments against President Trump around the January 6th matter. But at the same time, there's this whole controversy that just keeps brewing around Hunter Biden. And it is not getting less. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger, even though, they obviously want this to go away. It is not going away.
You mean the laptop is real?
Yeah. So that laptop is just the gift that keeps on giving. But just to mention a few things happening, we had the mysterious cocaine bag show up in the White House while you were gone, Victoria.
Who's cocaine? I'm surprised it doesn't have a name on it.
We had the Hunter Biden plea agreement dramatically fall apart in court. I don't know if you got to see any of that, but it really was quite fascinating.
Right.
This hero judge, I guess, deciding to stand up.
Didn't want to be a part of the corruption, I guess. I don't know. I was glad to see some aspect of this be righted, I guess.
Yeah, there's still courageous people out there. And now we have Devin Archer, this former business partner of Hunter Biden, saying that, this is just fascinating. He's giving testimony that Hunter constantly put his dad, which is President Biden, on the speakerphone like 20 times when he was having his, high-level business meetings, I'm assuming with these $1 billion, $1 million.
But wait a second. I thought the president swore he knew nothing about his son's business dealings. I'm pretty sure I heard him say that like 100 times.
Right. Yeah. That he wasn't involved. Yeah.
I don't know anything. I don't know. And at one point I heard an interview where somebody actually said, at this point, like, you've had tons of time to like investigate, like, shouldn't you know by now?
Well,
because he held that line for a long time.
Yeah, let's go to that real quick because I think we should play that. because it's really just been, I think you pointed out to me, maddening to see the double standard in the media with how they are covering this. And they've kind of, like you said, we've moved from the president never being involved or even speaking to his son about business to Biden's press secretary kind of subtly trying to nuance and say, well, now President Biden was, quote, never in business. It's moved.
Right.
It's never in business. So I guess we
didn't know about, but now we're not in business with. Yep.
Let's just listen to that real quick.
Curious if the White House and the president still stand behind his comment that he's never been involved and has never even spoken to his son about his business.
So I've been asked this question a million times. The answer is not going to change. The answer remains the same. The president was never in business with his son. I just don't have anything else to add. Okay.
Very interesting. She said he was never in business with his son. He has said he didn't even know what his son was doing. So some gray area there.
You know, it's just insulting to voters that they think they can get away with this stuff, that they think they can just get up there and magically change the narrative and no one's going to catch on.
Well, remember, the laptop wasn't really a thing, and then now it is. And so they think, I mean, they've been doing this for a long time on this storyline. It just keeps tweaking slightly so that we're supposed to pretend we didn't hear what we heard and see what we saw. And I mean, we're already hardly talking about the WhatsApp texts that talk about him literally taking money. I mean, literally that Hunter Biden is in a text saying to his daughter that he funds the family affairs, and we know the money is foreign money. Joe Biden's over there saying, I never take foreign money. Well, technically not if you're taking it from your son who's taking it from a foreign country. But I mean, we got a mess.
And yet they've come out with more talking points.
Right.
It's kind of funny because you can tell when they kind of circulate the memo because everyone starts saying the same thing. So now you got this weather one.
Yes. Yes. Apparently, even though they're on the call, they're just talking about the weather. It's never about business. There's like 20 times where the president, and Ben Shapiro made a really good point when he talked about this, is that in other countries, like just the presence of, they think that means that they can make a deal. Like he was explaining Chinese culture and some of and literally just Joe Biden being on the phone is for them the cue, like we're going to be able to,
Yes.
So.
Well, let's just play one clip of the many weather quotes from Democrats lately. This is from Representative Jim Himes.
Hunter Biden's business problems partner said, he was on some phone calls talking about the weather, exchanging pleasantries. Is that in the category of, presidential family members that are problematic? Billy Carter, Hugh Rodham, maybe it's in that category, but it is sure and absolutely not a crime.
Yeah, I mean, I think this entire line ignores the fact that what they're doing is they're demonstrating the brand. They know that means access. They know that means power. And there's even a reference at one point, like, if we don't pay up, why haven't we settled this matter? And then they go on to basically say something like, I'll remember this, and
is that everybody the one where he says, I got the big guy sitting right here?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when the president's on speed dial, it's kind of,
You're implying something. You're intending to imply something if you're not directly saying it.
Well, I did have to laugh at this Federalist headline. We're going to put this up on the screen for our YouTube viewers. Trump could have spent January 6th talking about the weather, and he still would have been indicted. Any comment on that?
Yeah, I mean... I wish Trump would have spent January 6th talking about the weather because that would have solved everything. But no, I do think there's such a double standard, and we all know this, but we're seeing it play out in such real time because we have such a contrast here between former President Trump and current President Biden and how they're being treated by the media and how the storylines are being fed to the people. And we obviously President Trump is up for re-election. I mean, he's trying to come back to the White House. You've got Biden trying to be, re-elected, and they're shaping that election.
I just wonder how long that can continue, that kind of double standard without a backfire, but we'll see. So I guess we're already starting to see some backfiring in the polls, but we'll see what happens. Well, speaking of presidents, we have also had some interesting developments in the presidential campaign heading into 2024, and it seems like there's been a little bit of shakeup. So we've seen former President Trump seems to have only solidified, despite him being in court over and over, the indictments, the efforts to attack him that way. He's still holding on very firmly to the base, apparently.
It actually looks like every indictment makes a firmer
Yes.
base. And I do think that is a reaction to this issue that we're talking about, this narrative. People are tired of a false narrative being driven, and so with every indictment, they just feel like it's one more thing where the government and the corrupt part of the government and the media are colluding together to squish down a candidate of ours. And so I think they just kind of, voters put their back up and they go, no, not this time. I'm sticking with my guy. And it's just an interesting thing to watch.
That's an excellent point. Of course, the question is this what the Democrats are intending? Are some
Right.
of them doing this because they want to escalate
Well, I mean, some of
Trump?
the polls will tell you, I mean, it depends what poll you read, but some of them will say that Trump he's the only guy that can't beat Biden in certain swing states. And so if that's, are they trying to do this to make sure he's the nominee, to make sure?
But that could backfire on them because Biden isn't doing so well either. So,
yeah, it's not like we're talking about a popular president, so I don't know. But
all right. Then Governor DeSantis, what's happening to him has been a bit surprising. We thought he was strong out there taking on the woke corporations and standing up to that political correctness in schools with the curriculum. And he seems to be kind of stalling out a little bit. I know he looks like maybe he had to do some campaign turnaround. Maybe there were some firings.
Yeah.
Looks like lost some big donors, or at least that's what's being reported. So
I
don't
mean,
know what's
there's
happening
always
there.
campaign shakeups. That doesn't stress me out. When somebody has to fire their staff and regroup, that happens even in ones that end up going on to win. I can think of McCain as a really big example of that. But I do think it's disappointing that he hasn't grabbed more ground because he has been such a successful governor. So I would have expected, because he has done everything that I would think a Republican base would want their leader to do. When you look at the state of Florida, and he's basically saying, look, I can bring America back that way. I think he needed to come out stronger. And I'm not a campaign strategist, but I think he needs to be the guy saying, I'm Trump, but not with the baggage. I mean, I think that would have been a much stronger, I am bold, I am aggressive, I'm willing to disrupt the established order of things, but I don't come with all the indictments. And I think they're afraid to say it that way. And I think because of that, he's not being seen as strong enough, which I think is interesting. I mean, the Republican Party has been reshaped under Trump. It is not the Reagan era Republican Party. And so the messaging has to be different, and something is just not catching fire with him the way I think we all thought it would, at least to some degree. I mean, there's plenty of time left. This is not to say he's down and out. I certainly think he's still a very strong contender, because I do think people, even though the voters are not as worried about an outsider coming in and becoming an elected official. I mean, Trump was evidence of that. He hadn't had a political career. I do think they can't ignore everything that Governor DeSantis has done in his record and say, oh yeah, that would be, if you could do that for America, that would be strong. So he's just got to do a better job of putting that forward and messaging. Some candidates lack a clear, short, compelling message that people grab. So go back, a bazillion years to somebody, and this is, he ended up tanking, but think of a Herman Cain, 999. Everybody could remember his tax plan because it was the only thing that was tagged with him. Sometimes it's just about stickiness.
Trump does keep things simple.
Making America great again. It is so simple. And sometimes we just don't simplify our messages enough. And politicians do this all the time. They have white papers on every issue, but we don't actually know the simple thing that they really stand for. And I think that might be a little bit of what they're struggling with. I would really encourage them to zone in on what is the exact message for the American people, and why am I a better choice than President Trump? Because President Trump is the incumbent. You're trying to take out an incumbent.
That's a good point, because all the battles that DeSantis has fought, but how do they all connect together?
Right.
And what is the one thing?
Compelling message, and I think that just hasn't really emerged strong enough.
All right. Well, at the same time, we have Senator Tim Scott picking up
he's picking up some
what
ground.
What do you think about that?
I think that's great. I think this is a great candidate, and if you didn't have a Governor DeSantis or a Trump in there, you'd be thrilled with a Tim Scott, right? He's a great. He's authentic. He's very fun. He's just a very kind of say it as it is kind of guy sometimes. And I think you kind of get that, I don't know, sometimes he even breaks into a preacher mode that kind of is this really interesting. So I think it's good. He's picking up some traction. We'll see if it's enough. Again, you're starting with Iowa. That's the big thing, trying to win in Iowa. But not everybody that wins in Iowa goes on to win the whole thing. So this is all a strategy question of, how, and there's always a timing thing. You want momentum, but you want momentum at the right time. So when I mean, some people peak too early. I mean, it sounds strange, but some candidates peak too early and then they don't go on to win the whole thing. So
could have been a DeSantis issue.
It's possible that there was so much hype about DeSantis getting into the race and that there was almost nowhere to go but down from the hype. And you can come back from that. But
it's a tricky calculation.
It's a dilemma.
Now, you were in Iowa and heard a lot of these candidates.
Yes.
Love to hear your impressions from that.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. Every candidate was there except President Trump. So we had all the other key players. And I would say there were a lot of surprises that day. They aren't necessarily reflective of the whole campaign. Nikki Haley performed better than anybody expected her to. Yes. She was the most conversational, the most comfortable, hit the most issues. But she also got softball questions compared to some of the earlier candidates. So Tucker Carlson was interviewing each one. And, being on the other side of Tucker Carlson, so in the morning he was really, really tough. And that was, Pence had to weather that. Asa Hutchinson had to weather that. And he got a little bit easier in the afternoon, I think because he got some criticism about just how intense his questioning had been. And so all that to say, he got a little softer. So Nikki really shone. A lot of people hadn't seen Vivek, and he's always compelling. So this guy, he's kind of a Silicon Valley type, but he is so smart, and he has a very compelling message. And so people, I think in the audience who had never heard him, were really wowed by that. The deal, though, is the guy never voted till 2020. Never even cast a vote. So he can be the most amazing orator, but you better make sure the guy is ready to actually be president. And so people have to really evaluate that. So it's not just a speech, but his speech was very compelling. And then DeSantis was great. He actually was really good in Iowa. Sometimes he's not as good, people say, with the one-on-one handshake, kind of like the consumer politics, the showing up at the store and
one-on-one type
stuff. That stuff. But he's always very good. He's good at interviews. He's good at speeches, and he hit the issues. He hit them well. So that was good. And then Tim Scott was interesting. He just made a strategic blunder, and it kind of affected the way the audience viewed him. So Tucker and he are here having an interview. And instead of him responding and having a kind of a conversation with Tucker, he would get out of his chair and kind of give a speech to the audience and actually put his back to Tucker. And the audience just didn't receive it well. His content was good. People liked Tim Scott, but that day wasn't his shining moment. But obviously he's bounced back because that was before he's really kind of started to rise back.
Probably had the wrong coaching on that one.
I think he got the wrong coaching, and he was like first out of the box. And I think if he had seen the others, or I don't know if they were allowed to, I don't know how those rules work, but I think that was just a strategic blunder on presentation, but nothing that can't be overcome.
Do you feel like when you are there and can see them in person, it's just kind of a different dynamic than what we get when they're on our television screens?
It is, and it so much matters what questions they're asked. When you're Asa Hutchinson, they went right to the fact that he vetoed a puberty blocker bill that we all disagreed with. So he, from the moment of go in that interview, he was on the defensive. Pence also got really, really hammered very early on, and so. But we need somebody that can take all that, right? Like you want a candidate because they're going to be in a debate, they're going to be in a ton of media interviews. But it is interesting to just watch how they react when they're put in the hot seat because.
So who took it the best then?
I think DeSantis did the best overall of hitting the issues he needed to hit, handling harder questions. I think he did the best.
He does do well with the media.
Yeah.
Well, if you just had one takeaway from all that you want to give the audience, is there anything?
I just always remind people that even when you see them in person, it's about the whole package. So you never want to, so even if you get to go to one of these forums where you hear all the candidates, it's never about that day. You've got to look at the record. You've got to look at what they've done. You've got to understand the whole person because again, like I said, a shining speech or great in the media can be one facet, but that doesn't get you all the way to the White House. And, I think people were looking for a candidate. Most Republicans are looking for a candidate that's going to beat President Biden. And that's the number one qualification we need in who can actually take out the current president. So,
all right, that's interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of presidential candidates, there was an earlier candidate that dropped out, and we have some interesting news about that one. You want to share with us?
Yeah, we are really excited that Secretary Mike Pompeo is going to be our gala speaker for this year. So September 23rd, we're gearing up for our annual big event in Richmond that everybody, it's always, a packed house, usually literally sold out. And we're really excited that he's going to come. He was, the 70th Secretary of State under President Trump. So that's what people kind of know him from most recently. He was a former director of the CIA. But really, I think people, if you haven't followed him well, you might not know, but he's just so strong on religious freedom. That's really where his heart is, and I think has done such a great job with that. And actually, incidentally, the weekend before our gala, he's coming out with a movie on Israel. It's called Route 60, and it's all about Israel. Okay. And so I think for our folks that really pay attention to matters in Israel, he's got a sweet spot in their heart because he's passionate about God's people and the Promised Land. And
well, I did want to share with our audience this little clip from a CBN interview back in the day when he first started out with Trump. And it kind of gives you some good, just a little good clip of where he's coming from with his faith. So let's just play that for a minute.
Mike Pompeo's life so far includes a growing list of accomplishments. Eagle Scout, first in his class at West Point, Harvard Law, Congress, and the first American to ever hold the top jobs at both the CIA and the State Department. His number one on the list remains a faithful decision, though, made back in college.
Can you take me back to West Point? I know there was a time in your life where there was a decision point for you about just, following Christ.
So I grew up going to church on Sundays, but frankly, it wasn't a priority in my life growing up. I went off to West Point, and as a young cadet during my freshman year, there were two young men who were juniors who were true men of faith. And they held these little Bible study / cookie clutches on Sunday afternoons. And they invited all the cadets to come see it. It was purely voluntary, and I started showing up, and truly remarkable. So I started going to church every weekend on my own because I wanted to be there to learn and to grow. And at some point during that first year, I really did come to have an understanding of Jesus that was different than the one that I had before, and it fundamentally changed my life.
Yeah, I mean, here's a guy who's pretty much kind of ridiculed, really, for, they called him God's diplomat, right? Like, it was almost, but I mean, I loved that the New York Times really had this to say, that no Secretary of State in recent decades has been as open and fervent as Mr. Pompeo about discussing Christianity and foreign policy in the same breath. Because I think that's what we want out of our leaders, is that they're authentic about their faith and that it drives their decisions. And so, anyway, I think he's great.
God's diplomat was the label the Washington Post put on there. And he did advocate strongly for religious freedom, whatever country he was going to, and just exposing where leftists were hurting religious freedom. So I'm excited about him coming. Give us that date again.
Yeah, September 23rd. So you can go ahead on our website at familyfoundation.org, and there's a banner right up top, and you can go click on that and figure out how you want to sponsor a table, bring your friends. A lot of church groups come together and so forth. So it's going to be a great night.
Put it on your calendar now. All right, well, that wraps up our show for today. Remember to share our playlist, our Speak Up Virginia playlist. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Apple or Spotify or some of those audio versions, be sure to like us and give us a 5-star review to help us get the word out there more. And remember, we are stronger when we speak together.